When Elena stepped off that train in Thunder Creek, Montana, she thought she was finally safe. A mail-order bride contract, a fresh start, a chance to escape the nightmare of her past. But what waited for her in that dusty frontier town would shatter everything she believed about family memory and the price of survival. This is the story of two sisters separated by tragedy, reunited by murder, and forced to confront a conspiracy that reaches from the battlefields of the Civil War to the highest offices in Washington. If you love stories of family bonds that transcend time and betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe, because this tale of sisterhood in the Old West will stay with you long after the final word. The sisters who discovered their husband was already dead, but still very much alive. The October wind carved through Thunder Creek like God's own blade, carrying whispers of winter and the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. Elena Rose Walker pressed her face to the train window, watching Montana territory unfold in endless waves of gold and shadow. 24 years of life had taught her that hope was a dangerous luxury, but as the locomotive carried her toward her new life, she allowed herself this one fragile dream. In her gloved hands, she clutched the final letter from Thomas Reed, the man who had agreed to marry a woman he'd never seen. The paper was soft from countless readings during her 3-week journey from Boston, but the words remained crisp with promise. My dearest Elena, by the time you receive this, all arrangements will be complete for our union. Thunder Creek may seem small, but it holds everything we need to build a life together. Come to me and let us begin forever. Elena folded the letter carefully, slipping it beside the $18.37 that represented her entire fortune. It was all she had managed to save after paying the debts her guardian Edwin Blackwell claimed she owed. Debts that had kept her trapped in his Boston boarding house for 3 years, enduring his wandering hands and whispered threats. The memory of Blackwell's touch still made her stomach clench. When Thomas's first letter had arrived responding to her carefully worded matrimonial advertisement, it had felt like salvation arriving on wings of prayer. Thunder Creek Station, the conductor called. End of the line. Elena's heart hammered against her corset as she gathered her single carpetbag. This was it, the threshold between her old life and whatever came next. She had burned every bridge behind her, spent her last dollars on this ticket. West left Boston with nothing but determination and the desperate hope that Thomas Reed was everything his letters promised. The platform was smaller than she had imagined, just weathered planks beside a water tower and a modest depot. Perhaps a dozen people moved about their business, and Elena scanned each face looking for the tall man with dark hair and gentle eyes that Thomas had described. But no such man stepped forward to claim her. Elena stood beside her bag as the train prepared to depart, the autumn sun warm on her face despite the cool wind. Minutes passed. The train pulled away in a great rush of steam and smoke, leaving her alone with strangers who were already dispersing to their own concerns. A cold finger of dread traced down her spine. Miss, you look lost. Elena turned to find a woman approaching, perhaps 40 years old with graying brown hair and kind eyes set in a face weathered by frontier life. She wore a practical dress and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems. I'm looking for Thomas Reed, Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. He was supposed to meet me here. The woman's expression shifted kindness, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. Oh, honey, you must be the bride he mentioned. Yes, I'm Elena Walker. Do you know where I might find him? The woman studied Elena's face with troubled eyes. My name is Martha Collins. I run the boarding house here. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Miss Walker, I'm afraid Thomas Reed passed away 2 weeks ago. The words struck Elena like a physical blow. The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and she had to grasp Martha's arm to keep from swaying. Passed away, but his letter, he wrote just 3 weeks ago. I'm so sorry, dear. It was very sudden. Some kind of stomach ailment, Doc Morrison said. Took sick on a Tuesday gone by Friday. Elena stared at Martha, her mind struggling to process this information. Thomas was dead. The man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry, the future she had sacrificed everything to claim, was nothing but memory now. She was alone in a strange place with $18 and nowhere to go. What am I supposed to do? The question escaped before she could stop it. Martha's expression softened. Come to the boarding house. We'll sort things out. This town takes care of its own. They walked through Thunder Creek's main street, and Elena tried to absorb her new reality. The town was larger than expected. 24 buildings, including a general store, hotel, church, and 3 saloons. People moved with purpose, nodding to Martha as they passed, their eyes curious but not unkind as they took in Elena's travel-stained appearance. The boarding house was a white two-story structure with green shutters surrounded by a picket fence and a garden gone dormant for winter. Martha led Elena inside to a parlor furnished with comfortable mismatched chairs and a stone fireplace where flames danced cheerfully. "Sit down, dear. I'll make coffee." Elena sank into a chair, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her exhaustion and despair. 3 weeks of travel, of anticipation and hope, had led to this moment of complete uncertainty. Martha returned with a coffee and settled across from her. "Tell me about yourself, Elena Walker. How did you come to correspond with Thomas?" Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to anchor her. "I placed an advertisement in the Boston Herald. Thomas responded. We exchanged letters for 4 months." She pulled out the small bundle of correspondence. "He seemed like a good man, educated, kind." Martha accepted the letters, reading them with the careful attention of someone accustomed to judging character. "These are beautiful letters. Thomas was always good with words. Taught at our school before he saved enough to start farming." "What kind of illness took him?" Elena asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Martha's expression grew troubled. "That's the strange part. Thomas was healthy as a horse one day, sick as death the next. Doc Morrison said it looked like poisoning, but Thomas hadn't eaten anything unusual." A chill ran through Elena. Poisoning, probably just bad food or contaminated water. "These things happen. The important question is what we do about your situation now." But Elena's mind caught on that word. Poisoning. Thomas's letters had mentioned no illness, no weakness. He had written of plans of preparing their home, of looking forward to her arrival. Then suddenly he was dead of mysterious stomach ailments. "Martha, was Thomas married before? Did he have family here?" "He was married, yes. His wife Sarah came with him from back east. Nice enough woman, though she keeps to herself. I suppose she's grieving something fierce." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "His wife, but his letters spoke of marriage to me." Martha's cup rattled as she set it down. "What do you mean Thomas was already married?" Elena pulled out the most recent letter. "He wrote about preparing for our union, about building a life together as husband and wife." Martha read the letter twice, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This doesn't make sense. Thomas loved Sarah, whatever their problems might have been." "What problems?" "Just the usual adjustments. Sarah had difficulty settling into frontier life. She was used to more refined society back in Philadelphia. Sometimes she seemed unhappy with their circumstances." Elena's heart began to beat faster. Philadelphia. That was where she had been born before her family moved to Boston, before the cholera took her parents and left her at Edwin Blackwell's mercy. What was Sarah's maiden name? "Walker, I believe." "Sarah Walker, before she married Thomas." Martha frowned. "Why?" Elena felt the world shift around her. Walker. The same name she carried. Sarah Walker from Philadelphia. A woman who would be about the right age to be. "Martha, does Sarah have any distinguishing marks? A scar or birthmark?" Martha sensed the importance of the question. "She has a crescent-shaped scar on her left temple, just at the hairline. Says she got it falling from a tree as a child." Elena's hand went unconsciously to her own left temple, where an identical scar lay hidden beneath her hair. The scar she had gotten at age 7, the day her older sister had dared her to climb the oak tree in their Philadelphia backyard. The day she had fallen and cut her head while her sister Sarah watched in horror. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. "Sarah is my sister." Martha's coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor in a spray of brown liquid and white porcelain. "Your sister, but that would mean, Mom, that would mean my sister married the man I came here to wed. The man who is now dead of mysterious poisoning." Elena's mind raced through implications. "Martha, I haven't seen Sarah since I was 8 years old. Our parents died and we were separated. I was sent to live with a relative in Boston. I never knew what happened to her. And now she's here, widowed and alone, just as you are." Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over Thunder Creek's main street. Somewhere in this small town, her sister Sarah was grieving her husband. The same husband who had been writing love letters to Elena, planning a life with her. The same husband who had died suddenly and mysteriously just 2 weeks before Elena's arrival. "Martha, I need to see those letters compared to other samples of Thomas's handwriting." Martha began cleaning the broken cup. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Thomas Reed didn't write those letters. Someone else did, someone who wanted me to come to Thunder Creek. Someone who knew exactly who I was." Elena turned from the window. I think my sister killed her husband and tried to destroy evidence by summoning me here to take the blame. The words hung heavy in the air. Martha straightened slowly, her face pale but determined. We need to talk to Marshal Davis and Elena. Until we know what's happening, don't let on who you are. Elena nodded, her mind working through possibilities. She had come to Thunder Creek seeking a new life. Instead, she had walked into a web of family secrets and possible murder. Sarah, the girl who had once braided her hair and told bedtime stories, might now be her greatest enemy. But Elena Rose Walker had not survived Edwin Blackwell's abuse and 3 years of grinding poverty to be destroyed by shadows from her past. She would uncover the truth about Thomas Reed's death, even if that truth destroyed the last innocent memory of her childhood. Even if it meant confronting the sister she had lost so long ago. 2 days passed in careful observation. Elena took a room at Martha's boarding house under the pretense of being a teacher seeking employment. Not entirely a lie, as she had taught briefly at a Boston girls' school before Blackwell forced her to quit. During those days, she learned the rhythm of Thunder Creek and about the people who made it home, including the man who would soon change everything. Caleb Stone owned the largest ranch in the territory, several thousand acres that supplied beef to growing settlements throughout Montana. Elena first saw him on her second morning in town when he came to the general store for supplies. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with dark hair showing premature silver at the temples. His face was weathered but kind, with lines around his eyes that spoke of someone who smiled often but trusted carefully. He moved with economical grace, and when he spoke, his voice carried the slight drawl of someone comfortable with horses and open sky. "Afternoon, Martha," he said, tipping his hat as Elena and Martha entered. "How are you settling these days?" "Well enough, Caleb. I'd like you to meet Miss Elena Walker. She's thinking about taking a teaching position here." Elena found herself looking into eyes the color of whiskey, warm and intelligent, and somehow familiar. "Mr. Stone, a pleasure. Likewise, Miss Walker." His handshake was firm but brief, and she noticed calluses that marked him as someone who worked despite his obvious prosperity. "We could use a good teacher. The children deserve better education than they've been getting. I understand there was a teacher here recently, a Mr. Reed." Something flickered across Caleb's expression. "Thomas, yes, his death was a great loss. I heard it was very sudden." It was. His tone suggested this wasn't a topic for mixed company. "If you'll excuse me, ladies, I have supplies to gather." He moved away deliberately, but Elena caught him glancing back once. There was something in his look, not romantic interest exactly, but recognition, as if he saw something in her that resonated with his own experience. That evening, Martha shared what she knew of Caleb Stone's history. He came 5 years ago with enough money to buy the ranch outright. Paid cash, which raised eyebrows, but he's proved a good neighbor. Where did he come from? Back east somewhere. He doesn't talk about it, but I get the impression he was running from something. Not the law, Martha added quickly. Caleb's honest as daylight, but something weighs on him. Elena understood that burden. She carried her own shadows, her own reasons for seeking new life in the untamed West. On her third morning, Elena finally gathered courage to do what she had been avoiding. She asked Martha to point out Thomas Reed's home. It was a modest house on the town's edge, with a small garden and picket fence needing paint. Smoke rose from the chimney. Elena stood across the street studying windows and wondering if the woman inside was indeed her sister. She was about to approach when the front door opened and a woman emerged to shake out a dust rag. Elena's breath caught. Even at 50 yards, even after 16 years, there was no mistaking that face. Sarah had grown beautiful with the same dark hair. Elena remembered the same delicate features that had made her the prettier sister as children. But something was different now. Something hard around the eyes that spoke of disappointments and compromises. Sarah glanced up and down the street, her gaze passing over Elena without recognition. Why would she recognize a sister she hadn't seen since childhood? Elena was about to cross when another figure appeared. A man tall and lean, with the kind of mustache fashionable among frontier gentlemen. Elena's heart stopped as she realized she was looking at Thomas Reed, very much alive and clearly not suffering from fatal stomach ailments. But that was impossible. Martha said he was dead. The whole town believed it. There had been a funeral, a burial, a widow mourning. As she watched Thomas kiss Sarah goodbye and walk toward Main Street, moving with casual confidence, Elena ducked behind a water barrel as he passed. She waited until both were out of sight before hurrying back to Martha's. Her mind spun with questions. If Thomas was alive, who was buried in the cemetery, And why had the town been led to believe Thomas Reed was dead? Someone was playing a sophisticated game, and Elena suspected she was meant to be the final piece on the board. That evening, she began writing a careful letter to the territorial capital marshal, requesting information about recent deaths in the Thunder Creek area. If Thomas Reed was alive, someone else had died in his place. If Sarah was involved in that deception, Elena needed to understand why before revealing her identity. She was sealing the letter when Martha knocked. "Elena, there's someone downstairs who'd like to meet you. Says he has a proposition for a woman with your education." Elena followed Martha to the parlor where Caleb Stone waited with hat in hands and nervous determination on his face. "Miss Walker, forgive the intrusion. I've been thinking about our conversation regarding your teaching aspirations." "Yes. My ranch is quite isolated about 10 miles from town. I'd like to establish a small school there for my ranch hands' children and neighboring families. The position would include housing meals and adequate salary." Elena studied his face for ulterior motives, but she saw only genuine sincerity and perhaps loneliness that resonated with her own. "That's generous, Mr. Stone. May I ask why you're so interested in education?" "Because knowledge is the only real inheritance we can leave. And because," he hesitated, "because I was a doctor once before I came here. I understand the importance of learning, of thinking clearly when life presents impossible choices." A doctor. That explained the intelligence in his eyes, the careful way he observed the world. It also raised questions about why a trained physician would abandon practice to raise cattle in Montana Territory. "What made you leave medicine?" Pain flickered across his features. "The war. I served as a Union Army surgeon after 4 years of trying to put men back together faster than other men could tear them apart." He shook his head. "I needed to find a different way to heal the world." Elena felt something stir, recognition of shared damage and hope for redemption. "Mr. Stone, your offer is tempting, but I should mention my situation here is complicated. I may need to remain in town to resolve certain matters." "What kind of matters? Perhaps I could help." Elena looked into those whiskey-colored eyes and made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Stone, can I trust you with a confidence that could put us both in danger?" "Miss Walker, after what I've seen and done, there isn't much that frightens me anymore." "Yes, you can trust me." So Elena told him everything. About the letters from Thomas Reed, about the mysterious death that wasn't a death, about her sister Sarah and her growing certainty that she had walked into a carefully laid trap. When she finished, Caleb was quiet, his expression grave. "Miss Walker, I think you need to disappear from Thunder Creek tonight. And you need to do it in a way that makes certain people believe you have moved on permanently." "Why?" "Because if you're right, your presence represents a threat to someone who has already committed murder. And if that someone is your sister," he met her eyes. "Family ties don't always override survival instincts." Elena felt a chill. "You think Sarah will try to kill me?" "I think someone will. The question is whether you are brave enough to see this through." Elena thought about Thomas Reed alive when he should be dead, about letters that had drawn her across a continent, about Sarah, the girl who had once protected her, now possibly transformed into something unrecognizable. "Mr. Stone, if I come to your ranch, it won't just be to teach. It will be to plan how to expose whatever truth is hidden here." "I understand. And it will be dangerous for you, too." "Miss Walker, I've been looking for a worthy fight since I came to Montana. Something to make up for lives I couldn't save during the war. Maybe this is it." Elena stood and extended her hand. "Then I accept your offer. When do we leave?" "Now, tonight, before whoever killed the real Thomas Reed realizes Elena Walker is more than she appears." As they prepared to slip away into Montana darkness, Elena felt the first stirring of something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of taking control of her own destiny, regardless of cost. Caleb Stone's ranch sprawled across a valley between pine-covered ridges, the main house a log structure that spoke of both comfort and permanence. As their wagon rolled up the winding drive in pre-dawn darkness, Elena could make out barns and corrals, bunkhouses, and storage buildings arranged with military efficiency. "You built all this in 5 years?" she asked, impressed, despite her exhaustion. "Most was already here. The previous owner had grand plans but poor execution. I just improved on his foundation." Something in his tone suggested he had done more than improve. Elena sensed Caleb Stone had taken something broken and made it whole, a pattern in his life. The house's interior was a revelation. Elena had expected frontier roughness, but found polished floors covered with fine carpets, comfortable furniture, around a massive fireplace, and shelves lined with more books than she had seen outside the Boston Public Library. The previous owner was educated, Caleb explained. He believed in surrounding himself with civilization. But the room he showed her next truly revealed his secrets. Behind an unassuming door lay a fully equipped medical office, surgical instruments arranged with precision, medicines lined alphabetically, an examining table that looked hospital fresh. My God, kid. Elena breathed, running fingers along a cabinet filled with medical texts. You didn't leave medicine behind. You brought it with you. Caleb's expression was carefully neutral. I treat my hands when they're injured. Some neighboring families, too. Word gets around. This is more than cuts and broken bones. Elena picked up a surgical saw, noting its pristine condition. This is complete surgical capability. Yes, but you don't use it. Caleb stared at the instruments as if they were torture devices. I swore after the war never again to hold a life in my hands, never to choose who lived and died. These tools, they're my reminder of what I used to be capable of. Elena heard the pain and understood. What happened that was so terrible, it drove you from saving lives. Andersonville. The single word hung like a curse. Elena knew about Andersonville, the Confederate prison camp, where thousands of Union soldiers had died. Few details had reached northern newspapers, but enough leaked to paint a picture of horror beyond comprehension. You were imprisoned there. No, I was sent as part of prisoner exchange negotiations in 1864, officially to evaluate conditions. Unofficially, he picked up a scalpel, testing its edge unconsciously. Unofficially, to treat the sickest prisoners and determine which might survive transport to Union hospitals. Elena waited, sensing more. 32,000 men in that camp when I arrived. Living skeletons crammed into space for 10,000. No shelter, sanitation, medical care. Confederates dying almost as fast as prisoners. Disease doesn't respect uniforms. He set down the scalpel with surgical precision. I had 3 days to choose which men to save. 3 days to play God. I chose 137 soldiers to evacuate. The rest, I left behind. You couldn't save everyone. You did what you could under impossible circumstances. Did I? Or did I decide 137 lives were all my conscience could bear when I learned the camp was overrun just 2 weeks after I left, when I realized many I abandoned might have survived if they'd held on? Elena understood his Montana exile. Why? He surrounded himself with books and cattle instead of patience. You blame yourself for choices you had no right to be forced to make. I blame myself for making them. They stood in silence, surrounded by healing tools Caleb could no longer use. Elena thought about survival choices that left soul scars. Caleb, what if helping me requires using those skills again? What if uncovering truth means becoming a doctor one more time? He met her eyes, fear visible alongside pain. Then I suppose we'll discover whether redemption is possible or whether some sins are too heavy to lift. The next week passed in strange domestic peace. Elena established school for Caleb's ranch hands children, teaching mornings while helping with ranch business afternoons. She discovered he was not only a skilled physician, but astute businessman, managing operations with the same systematic approach he'd once applied to surgery. Evenings they sat by the fire planning their investigation. Elena had written Boston contacts requesting background research on Thomas and Sarah Reed. Caleb made discreet inquiries among neighbors, piecing together timelines leading to Thomas's supposed death. What they discovered was troubling. According to Caleb's sources, Thomas and Sarah had increasingly bitter arguments in weeks before his death. Witnesses reported late-night shouting from their house, and Thomas had been seen in town with apparent bruises. Domestic violence, Elena suggested, reviewing their notes. Possibly. Or Thomas was being threatened by someone else. But who and why fake death instead of leaving town? Caleb spread a territorial map on his dining table, marking locations with pins. Look at this pattern. 5 unexplained disappearances within 100 miles in the past 6 months. All men, all between 25 and 40, it all with valuable property. Elena studied the map, feeling chill creep down her spine. You think there's a murder pattern? A pattern of something. Whether murder, claim jumping, or fraud, someone systematically targeting men with assets. And Thomas Reed. Thomas owned valuable land outside Thunder Creek, prime farming soil with water rights. The kind of property men kill for. Elena thought about her sister, the beautiful girl who had shared dolls and secrets. Sarah would inherit everything if Thomas died, but if Thomas is alive, then either someone else died in his place or the whole death was staged for another reason. That night, Elena lay awake in her comfortable guest room thinking about family. She had spent 16 years wondering about Sarah, creating fantasies where they might reunite as adults and reclaim their sisterly bond. Now she faced the possibility that Sarah had become someone capable of murder, someone who would lure her own sister across the continent as part of elaborate deception. The thought was almost too painful to bear. She was still awake when she heard it, horse hooves approaching at a gallop. Elena crept to the window, pulling back curtains just enough to see. A single rider was dismounting someone small and slight, moving urgently toward the house. The figure raised a hand to knock, then seemed to reconsider and began walking around the house, peering through windows. Elena's blood turned to ice as moonlight illuminated the intruder's face. It was Sarah. Moving quietly, Elena padded to Caleb's bedroom and knocked softly before entering without waiting. Caleb was already awake, sitting up with a pistol. "I heard the horse. Who is it?" "My sister. She's outside, looking through windows." Caleb was out of bed and pulling on clothes before Elena finished speaking. "Does she know you're here?" "I don't think so. She's looking for something, or someone." They crept to the front room, staying below windows. Outside, Sarah had moved to the barn, examining horses by lamplight. "Checking to see whose mount is here," Caleb whispered, looking for specific animals. Sarah emerged from the barn and approached the house again. This time, she went directly to the front door and knocked. 3 short raps, paused, then 2 more. "That's a signal," Elena realized. "She's using a code." Caleb was already moving toward the house's rear. "Stay here, keep watch. If she comes around back, signal me." But Elena couldn't stay hidden while her sister stood yards away. 16 years of questions and longing overcame caution, and she opened the front door. Sarah spun around, hand flying to her throat in shock. In lamplight, Elena could see her sister's face clearly for the first time since childhood. Sarah had grown beautiful, but something hard existed around her eyes now, something calculating Elena didn't remember. "Sarah," Elena said softly, "Well, hello, sister." For a moment, Sarah's face went through rapid emotions, shock, recognition, fear, and finally something like relief. "Elena Rose," she whispered. "My God, it really is you. I thought, when I got the letter saying Elena Walker was coming to marry Thomas, I hoped it couldn't be true." "What letter?" Sarah stepped closer, her eyes searching Elena's face for traces of the remembered child. "Someone sent word weeks ago that a woman named Elena Walker was coming to Thunder Creek to marry Thomas. I thought it might be you, but couldn't be sure. When Thomas said he'd never written to any mail-order bride." Elena's mind raced. If Sarah was telling truth, someone else had orchestrated Elena's arrival. Someone who knew about both sisters and deliberately brought them together. "Sarah, where is Thomas? The town thinks he's dead." Sarah's expression darkened. "Thomas is safe. Hidden. But Elena, you're in terrible danger. We both are. The people who killed the man in Thomas's grave, who arranged for you to come here, they're planning something terrible." Who did this?" Before Sarah could answer, Caleb appeared from the house's side, pistol drawn, but not aimed. "Miss Reed, you're far from home." Sarah's hand moved to her coat pocket, and Elena caught a gun's outline beneath fabric. "Mr. Stone, I should have known Elena would find her way to the territory's most notorious doctor." "Notorious? Don't you know Elena? Caleb Stone isn't just any frontier physician. He's the doctor who disappeared from Chicago 5 years ago after being accused of murdering 3 patients." Elena felt the ground shift. She looked at Caleb, expecting denial, but his face had gone carefully blank. "Interesting story," Caleb said quietly, "but not accurate. Isn't it 3 wealthy patients dead of mysterious ailments? Their wills changed days before death, leaving substantial bequests to their treating doctor. When authorities started investigating, Dr. Caleb Stone vanished without trace." Elena's throat felt tight. "Caleb, is this true?" "Part of it. 3 patients did die. Their wills had been changed. I did leave Chicago under suspicious circumstances. But I didn't kill them, and I know who did." Sarah laughed humorlessly. "Of course you do. Just like you probably have an explanation for why you've brought my sister here, isolated her from town, gained her trust." "Sarah, stop!" Elena stepped between them. "Everyone put down guns and explain what's happening." "What's happening?" Sarah said, not lowering her weapon. "Is that you've fallen into the same trap I did. The same trap Thomas almost fell into before I realized what was happening and got him to safety." "What trap?" "Elena, there's a group specializing in identifying wealthy widows and unmarried women with inheritances. They target them, court them, marry them, then arrange convenient accidents. When I realized Thomas was being drawn into their scheme—" "You faked his death to protect him," Elena finished. But who was buried in his place? Sarah's expression became grim. A drifter they killed to make the deception believable. A man with no family, no one to miss him. Alona felt sick. And my letters, the correspondence that brought me here, forged. Everyone. You were supposed to arrive devastated by Thomas's death, vulnerable and alone. Then Dr. Stone would conveniently appear to offer comfort. Elena looked at Caleb, heartbreaking. Is that what this is? Have I been played for a fool again? Elena, listen to me. Caleb's voice was urgent. Your sister is right about some things, wrong about others. There is a group targeting people with money. I have been investigating them, but I'm not part of their scheme. I'm trying to stop them. Why should we believe you? Sarah demanded. Because, Caleb said quietly, the 3 patients who died in Chicago were my friends, my colleagues, and the person who killed them is here in Montana territory running the same game on larger scale. Elena felt like she stood in a whirlwind, truths and lies swirling too quickly to catch. Who is behind this? Caleb and Sarah looked at each other, and Elena saw understanding pass between them. Marshall Davis, they said in unison. The name hit Elena like physical blow. Marshall Davis, the territorial lawman who should investigate exactly these kinds of crimes if he was corrupt. That's why you couldn't go to the law, Elena realized. That's why Thomas had to disappear instead of reporting threats. And that's why, Sarah said, finally lowering her gun, we need to work together to stop him before he kills anyone else. Elena looked between her sister and Caleb, these strangers who were now proposing to trust each other with their lives. All right, tell me everything. Then tell me what we're going to do about it. As they settled in Caleb's front room, Elena realized her quest for new life had led into something far more dangerous and complex than imagined. But it had also brought her to this moment, reunited with her sister, allied with a man who might be everything she'd searched for, and finally positioned to fight back against forces that had shaped her life. For the first time since leaving Boston, Elena felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The plan they devised over 3 days was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its risks. Sarah would return to Thunder Creek and publicly announce she had received word of Elena's death in a tragic accident while traveling to visit distant relatives. This would allow Elena to remain dead while they gathered evidence against Marshall Davis and his network. Meanwhile, Caleb would use his medical expertise to examine the body buried as Thomas Reed, looking for clues about the real victim's identity and murder method. And Elena would do what she did best, disappear into background and observe, gathering intelligence while everyone believed her safely out of the picture. What none anticipated was how quickly their plans would unravel. Elena was in Caleb's medical office, helping him prepare chemicals for corpse examination when Sarah burst through the front door without knocking. They know, she gasped, face pale with exhaustion and fear. Davis knows you're alive, knows you're here. He's coming. Caleb was already reaching for his medical bag, movements efficient despite urgency. How much time? Maybe an hour. I rode hard to get ahead, but Davis has 6 men. And Elena, Sarah turned to her sister with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, I told them where you were. Elena felt the world tilt. You told them, Sarah, why? They have Thomas. Davis found our hiding place, took him prisoner. He said he'd kill Thomas unless I brought them to you. The betrayal hit Elena like physical blow, though she understood the impossible choice her sister had faced. So you chose Thomas over me. I chose the hope that we might all survive if we're smart and fast enough. Sarah pulled a derringer from her coat and pressed it into Elena's hands. But they're not taking either of us alive, Elena. I won't let them. Caleb finished packing medical supplies and moved to a gun cabinet Elena hadn't noticed. How many men? 6 plus Davis, 7 total, all armed, all experienced killers. This isn't their first cleanup. Elena looked down at the small gun, its weight both reassuring and terrifying. Caleb, your medical skills won't help us fight 7 men. Maybe not, but there's something I haven't told you about those 3 patients who died in Chicago. He pulled a rifle from the cabinet, checking its action with practiced familiarity. They weren't just my friends. They were my unit from the war. Fellow surgeons from Andersonville. Elena felt pieces clicking into place. Someone has been hunting the doctors from Andersonville, killing them one by one. Davis was a guard at the prison camp, one of the men who decided which prisoners would receive medical attention and which would be left to die. When the war ended, he disappeared before he could be brought up on war crimes charges. Sarah stared at Caleb with new understanding. He's been tracking down everyone who might testify against him and eliminating them. The Cattle Ranch Medical Practice Upstanding Citizen Act. It's all cover for a man running from justice for 14 years. Elena moved to the window, scanning the horizon for approaching riders. Then this was never about money or mail-order bride schemes. This was about silencing witnesses. The money schemes were just how he funded his real mission and how he identified potential witnesses, people desperate enough to be lured into isolation where they could be killed quietly. Elena thought about the letters that had brought her to Montana, the careful way they'd been crafted to appeal to her specific needs. But I was never at Andersonville. Why target me? Sarah and Caleb exchanged a look that made Elena's stomach clench with dread. Elena, Sarah said gently, show Caleb the scar on your temple, the one from childhood. Elena touched the crescent-shaped mark, confused but complying. Caleb studied it, then nodded grimly. That's not from falling out of a tree. That's a surgical scar. Very precise, very professional. Elena's world began spinning. What are you saying? Sarah took her sister's hands, eyes filled with pain. Elena, we weren't separated randomly when our parents died. You were taken by someone who performed some kind of operation on you, then placed you with Edwin Blackwell to keep you hidden. Hidden from what? Caleb studied Elena's face with physician's intensity. Sarah, does Elena remember much from before age 8? No, very little. Blackwell said it was trauma from losing our parents. Elena, Caleb said gently, I think someone altered your memories. Surgically. There were experimental procedures during the war, ways to damage specific brain parts to induce amnesia. If someone wanted to hide information you possessed as a child, Elena felt ground dissolving beneath her feet. What information? What could I have known as 8-year-old that would be worth stealing 16 years of my life? Before anyone could answer, thunder of approaching horses cut through morning air. Elena moved to the window and counted 7 riders cresting the ridge, moving fast toward the house. They're here, she announced, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Caleb was already barricading the front door with furniture. Sarah, can you shoot? Well enough. Take the back of the house. Elena, you're with me in front. And Elena, he met her eyes across the room. Whatever memories they stole from you, whatever they made you forget, we're going to make sure you live long enough to get them back. The first shots came through the windows as Marshal Davis and his men surrounded the house. Elena crouched behind an overturned table, the derringer heavy in her hand, and tried to reconcile this moment with the life she had planned when leaving Boston. She had come west seeking safety and stability. Instead, she had found family secrets, government conspiracies, and a man who might hold the key to understanding her stolen past. Elena, Caleb called from across the room. The medical office, there's a root cellar beneath it with a tunnel that leads to the barn. If we can reach it. No, Elena's voice was firm. No more running. I've been running from shadows and half-truths my entire life. Whatever Davis wants from me, whatever I'm supposed to remember, I'm going to face it. Another volley of shots splintered the window frame above her head. Elena took careful aim through the gap and fired, satisfaction flooding through her as one of Davis's men cried out and tumbled from his horse. That's for 16 years of stolen memories, she muttered, reloading with hands that barely trembled. From the back of the house, she could hear Sarah's gun adding its voice to the defense. Her sister might have made questionable choices, but she was fighting for their survival now, with the same determination that had once protected Elena from childhood bullies. Davis, Caleb called out during a lull in shooting. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. What do you want? The marshal's voice carried clearly across the yard. I want the girl Stone, the girl and whatever she remembers about her father's work at Andersonville. Elena's breath caught. Her father's work. But her father had been a clockmaker in Philadelphia, hadn't he? Unless... Elena, Sarah called from the kitchen. Your father wasn't a clockmaker. He was a doctor, a surgeon who worked at Andersonville documenting war crimes. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting, images and voices and scenes that had been locked away for 16 years. Her father in a blood-stained apron, writing furiously by lamplight. Men in uniform coming to their house in Philadelphia demanding to see his notes. Her mother crying, begging them to leave the children alone. And then the operation, the kind doctor who said he was going to help her forget the bad dreams. The pain and confusion in waking up in a strange place with a new guardian who told her a new story about who she was and where she had come from. My God, Elena whispered, I remember everything. Her father had been Dr. Jonathan Walker, chief medical officer for the Union Army's investigation into Confederate war crimes. He had spent months at Andersonville documenting the systematic murder and abuse of prisoners, gathering evidence that could have hanged dozens of Confederate officers and guards after the war. Evidence that someone had been willing to kill for again and again over the course of 14 years. Davis, Elena called out, her voice carrying new authority. I know what you're afraid of. I know about the documents my father hid. The shooting stopped abruptly. What documents? Davis's voice was sharp with sudden fear. Elena looked at Caleb, understanding finally crystallizing. The evidence my father gathered. Names, dates, detailed accounts of war crimes. He hid copies before he was killed, didn't he? And I'm the only one who knows where. Elena, no, Sarah called urgently. Don't tell him anything. But Elena was beyond caution now. The memories were pouring back 16 years of stolen knowledge, returning in a rush of clarity and pain. She remembered her father's final words to her, whispered in the moments before the men came to take her away. The church bell. Elena rose. Remember the church bell? Thunder Creek's church bell. She had noticed it on her first day in town, noticed that it seemed familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Because it was the same bell that had rung in the church where her father had hidden his evidence. The church where an 8-year-old girl had watched him bury a metal box beneath the altar stone. Davis, she called out, I'll trade you the location of my father's documents for the lives of everyone in this house. Elena, no. Caleb was beside her instantly. You can't trust him. The moment you give him what he wants, he'll kill all of us. Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't get the chance. Elena was already moving toward Caleb's medical office, toward the surgical instruments that had been haunting his dreams for 5 years. Caleb, how long would it take you to perform brain surgery? What? The operation they did on me. The one that stole my memories. Could you reverse it? Caleb's face went pale. Elena, that's not how it works. Memory suppression surgery isn't something you can just undo. Even if I could perform the operation, there's no guarantee it wouldn't do more damage than good. But it's possible. Theoretically, yes, but Elena, the risks are worth taking if it means stopping Davis permanently. Elena was pulling instruments from their cases, her movements guided by half-remembered observations of her father's work. Because I don't just remember where he hid the documents about Andersonville. I remember what else he discovered. Information that goes far beyond one prison camp. Sarah had joined them in the medical office, her eyes wide with understanding. Elena, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Davis has been operating with impunity for 14 years because he believes he destroyed the only evidence against him. But what if he didn't? What if there are records, names, locations of other crimes, other conspiracies? Elena met Caleb's eyes. My father wasn't just documenting war crimes. He was documenting a network of corruption that reached all the way to Washington. People who were selling information to the Confederates, people who were profiting from the suffering of Union prisoners. A conspiracy that didn't end when the war did. The implications hung in the air between them. If Elena was right, then Marshall Davis was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a conspiracy that had been operating in secret for more than a decade. Caleb, Elena said quietly, I need you to help me remember everything, even if it kills me. Before Caleb could respond, the front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Davis and his men were through the barricade, moving through the house with military precision. Elena grabbed the sharpest scalpel she could find and pressed it to her own throat. Stop right there, Marshal. One more step, and your evidence dies with me. Davis froze in the doorway, his gun trained on her, but his finger hesitant on the trigger. Miss Walker, you're a very difficult woman to kill. Good, I've had practice. Behind Davis, Elena could see his men fanning out through the house. Sarah had her gun trained on the nearest one while Caleb was positioning himself to protect Elena's flank. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Here's what's going to happen, Elena said, her voice steady despite the blade at her throat. Dr. Stone is going to perform surgery to restore my memories. All of them. Every detail my father made me memorize before he was murdered. And then I'm going to tell the world exactly what kind of man you are, Marshall Davis. Davis laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And why would I allow that? Because, Elena said, pressing the scalpel deeper until a thin line of blood appeared on her neck. If you don't, you'll never know where my father hid the evidence. Evidence that implicates not just you, but your superiors in Washington. The people who gave you your orders. The people who are still giving you orders. Elena saw fear flicker in Davis's eyes for the first time. Real gut-deep terror at the thought of his handlers learning that their secrets might be exposed. You're bluffing. Am I then shoot me and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if today is the day someone finds those documents. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Elena could feel Caleb's tension beside her, could sense Sarah's readiness to fight. Everything balanced on this moment on Davis's decision between the certainty of Elena's death and the uncertainty of letting her live. Finally, Davis lowered his gun. "Dr. Stone," he said conversationally, "you have 1 hour to restore Miss Walker's memories. If she can't provide the location of her father's evidence by then, I'll kill everyone in this room slowly, very slowly." Elena met Caleb's eyes and saw her own determination reflected there. "Then we'd better get started." What followed was the most harrowing hour of Elena's life. Caleb worked with instruments that trembled in his hands, trying to undo surgical damage that had been expertly inflicted 16 years before. Without anesthesia, without proper surgical conditions, with armed men watching every move, he attempted to restore the memories that had been stolen from an 8-year-old girl. The pain was indescribable. Elena felt as if her skull was splitting open, as if lightning was striking directly into her brain. But with the pain came clarity, images and voice and knowledge flooding back in torrents. She remembered her father's last night alive, the way he had made her repeat the location over and over until she had it memorized. She remembered the face of the man who had come to kill him. Not Davis, but someone else. Someone whose identity would shake the foundations of the territorial government. And she remembered this most important secret of all, the location of not just one cache of evidence, but 3 hidden in different states and territories, each one containing enough information to bring down a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power. When Caleb finally set down his instruments, Elena's face was streaked with tears and blood, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Marshal Davis," she said quietly, "you're going to wish you had killed me when you had the chance." What she told him next changed everything. The documents weren't hidden in Thunder Creek at all, but in 3 separate locations across the West: Denver, San Francisco, and Santa Fe. Each cache contained not just evidence of war crimes, but records of ongoing criminal activities, including the systematic murder of witnesses and the theft of territorial lands. More importantly, each cache named names. Not just Davis and his immediate co-conspirators, but territorial governors, federal judges, even members of Congress who had been profiting from the conspiracy for more than a decade. Davis's face went gray as Elena recounted detail after detail, proving that her memories had indeed been restored. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Walker," he said finally, "you've just signed the death warrant for everyone you care about." "Have I? Because it seems to me that killing us now would just confirm everything I've told you. And if my friends in Denver receive word of my death," Elena smiled, though it sent fresh pains shooting through her skull, "well, let's just say they have instructions to open certain safety deposit boxes and deliver their contents to very specific newspapers." It was a bluff, but it was a good one. Davis had no way of knowing whether Elena had indeed made such arrangements, and the risk of calling her bluff was too great. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Justice. For my father, for Thomas Reed's friend who died in his place, for all the people you've killed over the years. I want you to confess your crimes publicly and implicate everyone who gave you orders. And in return, I'll make sure your confession is quick and merciful instead of slow and torturous. Because Marshal Davis, those documents don't just contain evidence of crimes. They contain evidence of who committed them. And some of your former associates might be very interested to know that you're the weak link who could bring them all down." Elena was gambling everything on this final bluff, but she could see it working. Davis's hands were shaking now, his confidence completely shattered by the realization that he was trapped between equally deadly alternatives. "Dr. Stone," Davis said quietly, "you have medical supplies here. Enough to make a man's death look like suicide." Caleb's voice was steady. "I have what you need." Elena felt a moment of pure victory as she realized that Davis was choosing confession and suicide over the slow torture his former allies would inflict if they learned he had been compromised. But victory turned to alarm as Davis suddenly swung his gun toward Sarah. "Unfortunately," he said with a smile that chilled Elena's blood, "I don't need all 3 of you alive to ensure Miss Walker's cooperation." The shot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Elena screamed, certain she was about to watch her sister die. But it was Davis who staggered backward, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. Caleb stood with a smoking pistol in his hand, his face set in grim determination. Nobody else dies today. What followed was chaos, Davis's men opening fire, Elena and Sarah diving for cover, Caleb moving with surgical precision to disable attackers while avoiding killing shots. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Davis's men were dead, 2 were wounded and disarmed, and Davis himself was bleeding but alive. "Dr. Stone," Elena said as she helped bind Caleb's wounded arm, "I thought you swore never to hold a life in your hands again." "I did, but I never swore not to save lives when I had the chance." Elena looked around the ruined medical office at her sister helping to tend the wounded, at the man who had risked everything to help her reclaim her stolen past. For the first time in 16 years, she felt complete. "Sarah," she said to her sister, "where is Thomas? Is he really safe?" Sarah's face brightened. "Hidden in the old mine shaft north of town. I told him to wait 3 days, then go to the territorial capital with our evidence if I didn't return." "Evidence?" "Elena, I wasn't just protecting Thomas when I faked his death. I was gathering proof of Davis's crimes. Thomas was helping me document everything. Names, dates, methods. We have enough to convict not just Davis, but half his network." Elena felt tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. "Then it's over. Really over." "Not quite," Caleb said quietly. "We still have to get this information to people who can act on it, and we have to do it without getting killed by Davis's remaining allies." Elena stood testing his balance as the effects of the surgery continued to settle. "Then we'd better get started. I have 16 years of justice to catch up on." As they prepared to leave the ranch, Elena paused in the doorway of Caleb's medical office. The surgical instruments were scattered across the floor, many of them broken or bloodstained, but they had served their purpose. They had given her back her memories, her identity, her power to fight. "Caleb," she said softly, "those instruments saved my life today. Maybe it's time to stop thinking of them as tools of destruction and start seeing them as tools of healing." He met her eyes and she saw something shift in his expression. "Are you saying I should practice medicine again?" "I'm saying that Thunder Creek could use a good doctor. A man who understands that sometimes healing requires fighting and sometimes fighting is the most healing thing you can do." Elena looked out over the Montana landscape, vast and golden and full of possibilities. She had come west, seeking a husband, and found something far more valuable. The truth about her past, a sister who loved her enough to fight for her, and a man who would risk everything to help her become who she was meant to be. 6 months later, Elena stood in the doorway of the new schoolhouse in Thunder Creek, watching her students practice their letters. The building had been funded with money recovered from Marshall Davis's criminal network, and Elena had insisted on teaching here rather than in the isolation of Caleb's ranch. The trials at Denver had been spectacular affairs with testimony that brought down 3 territorial governors, a federal judge, and 2 members of Congress. Davis himself had died in prison before he could testify, though Elena suspected his former allies had arranged that to prevent further revelations. Thomas Reed had emerged from hiding to reclaim his life and marry Sarah in a ceremony that was equal parts wedding and celebration of justice. They were building a farm on the outskirts of Thunder Creek, planning to raise cattle and children in equal measure. And Caleb had indeed returned to medicine, establishing a practice that served the entire territory. His ranch had become a kind of sanctuary for people recovering from trauma, a place where broken things could heal in their own time. Elena touched the faint scar on her temple, no longer ashamed of the mark that had once represented stolen memories. Now it reminded her that survival was possible, that identity could be reclaimed, that love could grow from the most unlikely soil. As she watched her students bend over their slates, Elena thought about the stories they would write when they grew up. Stories of courage and family and the endless possibility of redemption. The bell in Thunder Creek's church tower began to ring, marking the end of the school day. Elena smiled as she heard it, remembering how that same bell had once hidden the key to her father's legacy. Now it simply marked time's passage in a town where broken people came to heal, where secrets were transformed into stories, and where a woman could step off a train with nothing but hope and end up with everything that mattered. Elena Rose Walker closed her schoolhouse door and walked toward home, where Caleb was waiting with dinner and Sarah was waiting with stories to share, and the future was waiting with all its beautiful uncertainty. The adventure was far from over, but then again, the best adventures never really ended. They just transformed into new beginnings, one choice at a time.